Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our GP modernization webinar, where we'll explore some of the main functionality differences between GP and Business Central. My name is Travis Brooks, and I'm an account manager at Copus, and I'll be your moderator today. I also have fellow ERP account manager Heather Mitchell joining us, as well as Adam Drews from our leadership team. If you are not familiar with Copus, we were founded in 1999, and we are a Microsoft partner for Dynamics GP, Dynamics Nav, and Dynamics 365 Business Central for ERP implementations, customizations, and support. We are also a provider for custom software development for internal and external applications for web and mobile. And we also have a business intelligence practice that's focused on SQL servers, data warehousing, and visualizing through dashboards like tools like Power BI. Introduce you to the general manager of Copus ERP, Adam Drews. Adam, I'll pass it on to you.
Welcome, everyone. Goal today is to go through a few. Obviously, it's large application. Both GP and Business Central are large applications. So, we're going to try to call this an overview level. There's certainly places where me personally, I know things a little bit deeper. My background's in software development, so when we tend to get into the actual technical implementations of Business Central, that's probably where I'm a little bit stronger. But then, I've seen a number of things that we've done for the numerous clients that have worked with us. So, trying to give that overview, and then, as Travis mentioned, we can do deeper dives if we get out above or out over my skis on certain topics with the consultants who know this technology really well. So, without further ado, go through the beginning. So we'll start with native functionality. We'll do some of the other more technical things. Also talk about some of the ISVs in particular. So as we start with the biggest difference that most people, and I mentioned this on the last webinar, Business Central is dimensional rather than segment-based for the chart of accounts. Business Central's chart of accounts is dimensional as opposed to segment-based, as in GP. So as you can see in our chart of accounts window here, you'll see the native accounts listed there on the left-hand side, and then names. And then as we get into the reporting side of things, then think of it as a pivot table or an Excel sheet where your dimension, which in some cases, some clients move over and turn a segment into a dimension. That's really common. Sometimes we rethink. We've got 8 dimensions in Business Central, so you can maybe get more granular in some of your tracking, and you don't have to have a segment. Well, you don't have to have a dimension value for every single posting. You can actually set up the rules for that, and so it allows you to keep your chart simple, and then actually get some intelligence in how we post. So you can see in the 2 other screenshots, I have a default value for one of our customers is in the customer group. This is the dimensions in Kronos, which is one of them is customer group, and they have small, medium, large. So that's how they divvy up maybe that particular company. And so in one customer, I've defaulted them to medium. And then on a GL account later, I basically set the department code as it's always going to be prod because it's a job cost in this case. And then if we have customer group, we would list that as a potential, so that in each posting it would require you to select one of the customer groups if that job was associated with one of those customer groups. So this gives us a little bit of flexibility and smarts. Copus uses this type of functionality. We have a couple of R&D accounts, for instance, and so we have a dimension for R&D projects, and the only things that we post R&D dimension values to are those that are R&D accounts, and they're mandatory. We have business units. We have if we've been acquisitive in the past, and so we actually tag some of our revenue with an acquisition value, so we can see the what the impact of that acquisition has been. So it's pretty aside from the normal run the business and kind of slice and dice, there's some pretty interesting ways to use this without making your chart of accounts kind of explode. There's also some cool things with regard to you can actually correct dimensions, so with the right permissions, and obviously there's changelog around this. If you posted to the wrong dimension for whatever, you don't have to back everything out, and so you have control, but it doesn't have quite the say the overhead and activity to do those things. You can rename accounts. So one of the nice things about this being totally related, you don't need pistol tools or anything like that to rename accounts. So if we wanted to rename one of these accounts, we can just go in there and it'll run through. Obviously, there's a lot of postings that it can take a little while, so we don't do that. We lock in the database while we do it, but for the most part, those things run pretty quickly. And then the other thing that's a little bit different is on items, for instance, instead of listing the GL accounts that item is going to, so the sales, the purchasing GL, we actually will use posting groups. And so think of posting groups kind of like the combination of classes in GP. So we've got a matrix between our, say, customer posting group and item posting group, which then defines which GL account based on what action we're taking. So in the case of customer, if it's a sales, so we might have large customers as a posting, but a customer posting group, and so that would maybe gives you a little bit more flexibility. A lot of times we're setting it up one-to-one. Any questions about the chart? Next are the way we interact. It's card views and list views, and those list views are nice modern lists. So we have great search functionality. So it'll do a star search, so we can look for anything in any of these columns. You can use some pretty good smarts when it comes to filtering. So we can use there are different shortcuts, and then we can even filter so that the data that's in some of these lists are aggregated pieces of data. So I'm on the chart of accounts table, the chart of accounts list over here on the right, and I basically made a P&L. So I could filter my totals by certain dates, and I could basically create a P&L out of my list. So there's some pretty powerful ways that we can interact. Just recently, they've added a pivot, so an analysis mode for our lists. So this is taking the smart list concept and saying, okay, well, that was really an important piece of our, for our GP customers. How can we take this to the next level? And so basically building kind of that Excel pivot table capability right there within our list, which is pretty exciting. The other thing about the list is that you can all of these lists you can export to Excel, you can edit in Excel. So instead of just dumping the data into Excel, it puts the data in Excel with a connection back to the API. And so where appropriate, you can actually make updates. So, if you were on the pricing table and you wanted to do some bulk updates for pricing, you can edit in Excel and, copy and paste and set start dates and end dates and things like that. So that's a pretty powerful feature. And also for Excel refreshable ports. So if you connect the data to multiple lists, build out your visualizations or your other reporting tools, you can just hit refresh and all of that's updated. The other thing is out of the box. A lot of times we were using Smart Connect, which is still a powerful tool, and we still use it. But there are configuration packages available. So that's just a term for Business Central has a way to upload Excel to export what data you want to ingest or export. So you might define that I would like data from these 4 tables. I'd like these columns from each of those tables. You do that. You export it as Excel template. Maybe that's just to get the data, or maybe that's to get a template because I'd like to maybe update data within that. It's one of the things that we use in some of our implementations. So we might export the templates for the master data, and that'd be where we're exporting data from GP and dumping it into those sheets to update. Again, Smart Connect takes that to the next level. It's faster, it has better mapping, but out of the box, we do have this. And then we also can connect to the Dataverse. So the Dataverse is Microsoft's, kind of one-stop shop for where business data goes. CRM's built on top of it, and some of the other D365 apps. We can use that to then connect. There's direct connections, but we can also use that to either connect Power BI, Power Automate, and do some pretty incredible things. We can copy paste right into some of the, like on a journal entry. We had one client who gets a Excel sheet of lot numbers, and then they can just cut and paste that right into the item tracking line. So most of those editable lists just support Excel type of cut and paste right out of the box. And then, Smart List Builder from E1 has also looked ahead and said, how can we make this tool better? And they've released PopDoc, which you may have seen some things on. PopDoc basically takes Smart List Builder and says, I don't care if it's Business Central or CRM or other tools. They've created those connectors because of Smart Connect to various tools, and they can combine that into multiple. So Smart List Builder from anywhere, essentially. So then the next thing is Business Central. So not totally different than other ERP systems, but they're really consistent about using the journal ledger concept, both at the general level, but also through their sub ledgers. So we have a general journal, and then we have a version of that's the recurring journals. And as you can see, there are batches, and we can post through journals, just common activities we do. We have the ability to tag those with our dimensions as well. It was off the end of my screen, so it didn't copy in here. But we can also do one cool thing I see Nancy and team showing our GP clients is that we also we have sales journals and purchase journals as well, where we can actually essentially do without creating a purchase or a sales invoice, we can kind of post through hitting the customer and making sure it hits the sub ledger as well, not just make a general ledger entry. So that's kind of and just a single line. We can do that with our fixed assets, banking, jobs, inventory. So the journals are really nice in hitting the sub ledger as well as the general ledger. It happens all at once, so we're not syncing any of those things. You can preview posting as well. So if you are going to hit your sub ledger, and maybe it's a complex, and you can do you can have multiple dates on the journal entry. You can preview posting, and it'll show you all the impact that it's about to have. So you can troubleshoot those a little bit easier. My notes. Budgets are journal and ledger based. So when you upload your budgets, which are not all that different than GP. It's most of us do that Excel based, and so Copus does that too. We upload our budget via Excel. We do ours by dimension. So historically, I've been responsible for producing an ERP budget. So I would be submitting mine. It's tagged with the ERP dimension, and so Andy could upload that and impact my. So we post that to the budget ledger, and then when we so that would update that, and then when we do reporting, we can pick which budget uh, we are comparing our actuals against. Let's check my notes, make sure I have. Year-end close journals can be run multiple times, so if, that's one nice thing. And then allocations. Okay, so there are some pros and cons again for allocations, GP versus BC. So on the GP side, the way I understand this is, we set an account. So a GL account is where is going to be the source. So anything we have in a particular GL account is going to be allocated across based on maybe static allocation, for instance, to other accounts. In Business Central, we might do that based on an item. So I might be here in a journal and I have an item in that, and manually allocate that against. So it's a simpler, but it's a little bit more manual in that case. But then it also has a heavier weight version of allocations where think the traditional cost centers and so I have my cost objects, which may be rent and other indirect and overhead costs. And then I have my cost targets, which might be those cost centers. So that's when you get into a little bit more heavyweight rules, but you can certainly get a lot more granular in that regard. So I guess you might say that the simple end of allocations for Business Central maybe not as good as GP's allocations, but maybe on the higher end on the other side. So GP might slate right in between the two options on the Business Central side. Business Central being originally based in and still developed in Europe and Copenhagen. They've been multicultural from the get-go. So as they've extended that into the cloud environment, it's actually been pretty nice. And I actually anticipate some additional changes here in the future. So when you create a new environment, whether it's production or sandbox, you actually are specifying the localization. The localization is primarily, but not completely limited to, things like tax laws and other specific things. So like I know I have Italy here, and they have specific like sales invoice reporting requirements to the Italian government, and so it rolls those things into that environment so that you can be compliant with the various local. Canada has the same thing with PST, GST, HST. But you can create those right here in you have access to create that. And, it's a pretty simple process. And then switching companies, if you're not using binary stream, you can create as many companies as you want. There's no limit on that. And as you switch to them, it's simply by just going up into I clicked on the production where it says environment production, clicked on that, and I can search for whatever company in whatever environment. So in our environment, we had 3 sandboxes and 1 production. So I could switch to wherever I'd like to go, and I can search for that so I can get to those quickly. Simply just reloads the screen and you're good to go. On the reporting side, this is an area where I think there's some places where, again, there's some pros and some cons. So we have a concept called financial reports in Business Central. This is a rebrand of what they called account schedules. Account schedules would be the closest thing to something like Management Reporter. From the consultant's point of view, we've found that we'd say that management reporter is probably a little bit more capable, but for most of our 90% of our clients implementing Business Central, we've done this with the account schedules and analysis views, no problem. There are some, it still has some really great functionality. All the account schedules work on all the GL data. Analysis views can work on both GL data as well as your subledger data. So you can have sales, inventory, et cetera, pulled into that analysis view, which is great. And you can still do, you can still do various formulas, et cetera. You can see a little screenshot from one that we do internally. And so you can create some great reports. There's obviously Excel, Power BI, Jet, Solver, all those tools. So and others. We actually have some new relationships that we've made over the last 6 months to a year with some tools that maybe slate in under Jet from a cost perspective, but are closer to MR. The other thing that actually is really great, the change log in Business Central is really highly customizable, configurable. You can turn on pretty granularly what you'd like to audit for changes, whether that's because you have audit requirements or you want to make sure that you know who changes a sales and receivables setup or a customer card or item card. We get into the warehouse and supply chain management. Both GP and Business Central, have MRP. Where Business Central excels a bit compared to GP is that it does have WMS functions built in out of the box. So you've got bin management, you've got your zones, you can set up picks, puts, lot serial tracking, you can have directed picks and puts, transfer orders. And then when you start to get into your MRP, then where Business Central starts to excel there is that instead of doing it item based, you start with item and then you get you have stock keeping units, and you can set rules on your stock keeping units that might be, say, location based. So let's say that we have a client who has 2 locations, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast. And as they do MRP for their 2 locations, they have some of their stock keeping units set up so that they're not purchasing, or they might be transferring from one warehouse to the other. So when they run that MRP, it can generate transfer orders by location. So another example would be maybe I land everything in one warehouse and the other warehouse only accepts transfer orders. So you don't get yourself into a place where the MRP suggests something that's not appropriate because you're not it doesn't know those types of rules. What's cool then about that is that most of what we see from there are enhancements to the way that Business Central already runs. So an example would be one of the distribution organizations. They, as far as how they do planning, so you can set from an MRP perspective, you can set all your lead times, all that kind of good stuff. But what they needed was a little bit more dynamic, and so they added it's a little bit more of a specific add-on on the demand planning side to adjust those reorder points and things like that. And that's a Lanham tool, can take into account things like seasonality, and so they have to deal with like Chinese New Year and things like that. And that's a little bit more of a really specific add-in but then enhances the existing function that's out there rather than replacing the warehouse or replacing large swaths. When you get into scanning, for instance, the same thing. We typically use InsightWorks. It uses the pick document, but it connects to Business Central and essentially produces that in a scanner or a screen format, and will push into Business Central. So that's predominantly how it works. When you get into those warehouse documents, and I've got a purchase order here to show the concept, but the picks, the puts, the shipments, receipts, all of them use sort of this quarterbacking document approach, where my purchase order, in this case, it could be the warehouse shipment document, does the same thing. It's the quarterbacking document. It's the live document, and I might have a quantity to ship here, and then I have quantity shipped. So you'll see the past tense version of that, and that kind of tells you the here's what I have to do, here's what I've already done, and the gap between that is what remains. So I might post multiple shipments off that warehouse shipment document because I only decided on that quantity to receive. I might have changed that to 2 when the total was 6, and I only posted 2 off of that. So you can kind of and that can happen on all those types of documents. So you end up with your archive document that is related to the original document, but you can have multiple. So as we get into maybe some more of the technical, the biggest thing is that this is, as you can see from the screenshots, it's a web application. So it's available both in your browser as well as a phone app for the major, both Android and Apple. The interesting thing about that is it's driven by Office 365 identities and the Office 365 as well as Azure Active Directory security. So you can put the rules that you need to protect yourself in that Azure Active Directory security, for instance. So like geographic login, restrictions, multi-factor authentication, all those things can go into the identity management, and those are ubiquitous across all your applications within the Microsoft Cloud platform. So you're managing one sort of security workload, if you will, with regard to identity. So if somebody leaves, turn off access to that person, and all across all your applications gone. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. License assignment happens in O365 as the O365 portal as well. So that's license assignment and access, and then you manage your actual role-based security and granular security permissions within the application. There is no database exposure. It's a software as a service application. So we'll get into and we have talked a little bit already about how do we access the data, right? Dataverse, APIs, that's the primary way to access that data. And so those are PopDoc and other ways to do so. And so we've got to balance the security and protecting against things like crypto with access to the data that we need to run our business. One of the cool things is, as a software as a service platform, the investments that they've made across the board mean that even if you're a one user license, you're still getting the geo redundancy. You're still getting a highly available system. It's got point in time recovery for 30 days or your last update. You can manage your own environment. So the environment that, like Copus, I can spin up a clone of production. You can restrict that. Obviously, you can put permissions on who can and can't do that. even as a partner, you have you have control over our access. So the way that we connect to your environment is with what's called granular delegated admin privileges. So you're telling Copus you're allowed to access the Dynamics 365 environment, and we supply an Azure Active Directory group that is least privileges. So we are giving access to a select few people within our organization that can then access your environment. So you've got control over that. The system auto scales. So if you're at month end and everybody's in the system, or you've got high production volume or whatever, the system will actually automatically scale as it receives demand. And then if you find that somebody creates a lock in the system from a long running query or things like that, they're in the admin portal. You can actually go see all the sessions, and you can yourself. We're happy to do it as well, but you can cut that session, and it'll unlock the database. So it's got some protections in there, and then they've also included the Azure telemetry, so you can actually get really deep into what's going on in your environment the way you can with a lot of different applications these days. So one of the coolest things, I'm a developer, so I do nerd out on this a little bit. We have a sort of a movement, right? A client and demand to with a pain of upgrades, right? I've seen it within our own client base. It's something that I've thought about a lot as we've moved into the Business Central world. Customizing an environment historically and doesn't end with this new environment, but customizing an environment, the more we customize it, especially historically, meant that the cost of upgrades was significant. The way we upgrade, the way we extend Business Central is different than NAV. It's also different than GP and SL. They've taken the beauty of NAV's extensibility, and they have sort of separated it. So parts of what was of the NAV environment and what's called Cal to modify the environment, super cool. But we also had the ability in NAV to modify base code. So with great risk, we basically had the keys to the kingdom, and we could create things that with an upgrade could cause issues. I say we collectively. So with the extension model, that turns into event receiver type of model, which is a modern pattern. We develop our code in Visual Studio, compiled. It's packaged up. They're actually separate from the base code and the ISV code. So in fact, we have scenarios where we've written customization that's not uncommon, that even on the major updates, we don't have to do anything. It's just none of the APIs have changed, and so we don't have to do anything. So we've also built into our support model that if customization is right, and we want to keep it simple as possible, but you just may need it, it's on us. We have made the investment into our development team. We've got 20 something years of custom development out there. From an experience perspective, we're ready to put our neck on the line to say, yes, we can keep that updated as the pace of change moves. So, and then you can actually do stuff outside of BC, right? So you may develop a Power App that pushes data into into Business Central when you're done. You may have something in a custom system or CRM. It could be a workflow. We've taken more complex like work approval workflow scenarios and taken them into Power Automate, where they might automatically look for people who are out of the office and things like that and reroute them. And certainly have some more complex paths. ISVs, partners, and clients use the same extension model. So binary stream, Copus, whoever is providing that app, we all use the same platform. So the cool thing about that, especially when you think about you've got GP, NAV, and SL, where a majority of the clients of those systems are looking at and kind of going towards the Business Central world. So that means that the ISVs partners are doing the same thing, and so you've got a ton of GP ISVs who now have apps in AppSource for Business Central. Same thing with SL. So the ecosystem is pretty large. When it comes to the ecosystem, we're just showing just the Microsoft ecosystem, but they continue to make this an immersive experience amongst all of their platform, all of their applications. So we're seeing each year the integration between Business Central and other things, SharePoint, Power BI, Power Automate, Power Apps, Teams, all of that get tighter and tighter and tighter. And as we, kind of fill in the gaps, we have access to all those things. So, as we build a Power Automate approval workflow, we can be posting to Teams so that people are responding quickly and getting their work done quickly, so the decisions can be made faster. But that also applies to the ISV world, as I mentioned. In particular, I've got a list of kind of core ISVs that we've worked with in the past. There's lots more, but within our client base, certainly E1 with Smart Connect and Smart List Builder. So Smart Connect connects to a boatload of data sources. It's not just about connecting to a file or GP or Business Central, CRM, all kinds of different data sources are out there, and it's got a great mapping tool. So it is something to consider for your ETL type processes. Microsoft has its own ETL platform that came out of inspiration from SSIS. So you can do Data Factory and other types of things to do transforms as well. Smart List Builder has become, they've restarted. They started from the ground up with PopDoc. PopDoc, like I said earlier, and just like Smart Connect, connects to all those other systems and creates matrix or list reports, beginning to do some matrix reports that you can then take action on. McCormick Micker is over into the Business Central world. We used to do, we just update a kind of an RDLC report, but now we've got Micker. Integrity Data has moved over into the Business Central world, and they've added on HR in addition to payroll, which is nice. Cavallo, they've actually taken a little bit different approach than their GP. So, with in the GP world, they were solving for some of the deficiencies, a little bit of the deficiencies on the operational side. In the Business Central world, Cavallo has really focused on more on the front office, the sales side of things, and so they've created order management. They have another, their workflow tool, which is far easier, more intuitive to configure. So they've got the equivalent of their sales dashboard, the visualization of where everything is in the various queues. So you can build those up. You can build up the rules. All that exists now with Business Central, and it does make it a lot easier to see. Business Central has all those documents that I mentioned earlier, and it kind of brings them all up into a much easier view to get to them all quicker, so you can see them a lot faster. And then once you have those queues, so think where you are maybe today with SalesPad, Cavallo, with the queues, they've got an analysis tool that then analyzes the actions that you're taking, both in Business Central and within their order management and the queuing system, and they're giving you analysis on, well, in this queue you've got big orders that are taking longer, or this particular order is taking longer than on average, or this is an outlier to what your traditional this particular queue is. You might want to take action on this. So they've taken what their vision for their product and taken it a little bit further. And so then they work with tools like InsightWorks, where InsightWorks is historically an NAV, now Business Central platform that enhances app that enhances Business Central. So they a lot of times you'll see a Cavallo plus Base BC plus InsightWorks to deliver that distribution functionality. Binary Stream has moved over as well. They first came in with the subscription billing, and then they added multi-entity management. Cool thing about multi-entity management in Business Central is it uses the native dimensions. So one of the global dimensions becomes that entity, and then you have some really great granular permissions and all the do to do froms that make that tool automate that intercompany in management. Jet and Solver, those have been long time NAV, and those continue to be stalwarts in this ecosystem. I'd say that so Jet just acquired a budgeting tool about 6 months, a year ago. Solver's been doing advanced budgeting for some time now, so both of them now have both the reporting and the budgeting. In one thing that we do typically use in the Business Central world that we didn't in the GP world is that fund accounting and encumbrance management. That's something that we do typically use an ISV for. We've got two great partners on that one, and then IntangiCloud and Syllogist. And then with Power BI has been something that I'd say at least half of our clients are using in the Business Central world, just because it's so easy to connect. I mentioned upgrades a little bit before, and I think in the previous webinar, upgrades are much simpler, and Microsoft continues to give us more and more control. So today we can schedule both. We can influence the schedule on the minor updates, and we can get really granular on when we want to schedule the major updates. Minor updates happen every month on average, and then major updates happen. They're typically released near the beginning of April and the beginning of October. When we do upgrades, we can get as formal or informal as you like in that process. So we've got a group of clients who are maybe predominantly GLAPAR, and they let the minor updates roll, and then major updates, they may do some super light testing. We've got other clients that some of the larger distribution clients, or clients that have some robust integrations. We clone production into a sandbox. We go back to the user acceptance testing scripts that we had, and maybe they might execute a subset of those. So if you recall from the GP update process, it's not all that different than than what we did in the GP days. It's just that we can just tell Microsoft clone production, and it'll go do that, and it's really nice to reduce effort. So then we can do that. Do reporting comparisons, user acceptance testing. If we do find anything, we can triage that in the sandbox and then schedule it for a maintenance window. And what's great about that is that we've changed our model because of this. So as let's just say you had customizations, but even if you didn't, as part of that sandbox process, if there was a customization or an ISV, we're helping you triage that. If it's a customization and the API has changed, that's on us to go change it. So we go update the code, and then we can go back through user acceptance testing with you. And because of that, we've changed our model. It's just part of support. So that flat fee that you're paying for support, we've tried to keep that as low as possible, and we're helping you through those upgrade processes because they have to happen every 6 months, and you can't wait for us to update that code. We've got to be proactive about it and get that so that you can get your upgrade done and feel confident, and it's reduced a lot of stress and overhead for you as well. That I think I've rolled through most of the topics.
We're happy to stay on for a few more additional minutes if anyone else does want to chat, but if you don't, thank you so much for attending. Really appreciate your time and attention. With all that said, our webinar is adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.